Aromatic Chat, the podcast that introduces you to registered, clinical, and certified aromatherapists around the world. Every other week, my Mima sits down with a different aromatherapist to learn about their aromatic journey and how they use the plants that God has given us in their lives and their businesses. Aromatic Chat is produced by Lemon Balm Coaching, and your host is my Mima, Melissa. She is a master transformational coach and a registered aromatherapist.
Hey friends, welcome to episode 108, Aromatic Chat with Joy Bowles. Joy has been involved in aromatherapy as an essential oil science educator since 1991 and is most well known for her book, The Chemistry of Aromatherapeutic Oils. For her doctorate in 2007, she conducted studies on the effects of essential oils on cognitive function in dementia. In 2017, she started teaching online and she ran the Aromatherapy Journal Club for 5 years. She is currently creating and teaching the Constituent Spotlight series for the Tisserand Institute and collaborating in the development of aromatherapy research reporting guidelines with the Aromatherapy Research Quality Appraisal Task Force, also known as ARCOT. Every now and then, I invite someone who is not an aromatherapist to speak on the podcast because of their contributions to the field. Though Joy is not an aromatherapist, she is one of the many extraordinary people who teach aromatherapists the knowledge and skills that we need to be able to show up for our clients. I am so excited to get to speak with Joy today, so let's get started.
Okay.
All right, Joy, thank you so much for joining me. I appreciate you and everything that you're doing in the aromatic world. And I know you were thinking, but I'm not an aromatherapist. Do I really fit on your podcast? And the answer is yes, because you're one of the people that trains aromatherapists. So thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah. Pleased to be here.
Yeah, I'm so glad to have you here. You know, I'm on the board of the Aromatherapy Registration Council now. And having that understanding that there are people who are not aromatherapists, but have a very important role to play for the rest of us is kind of key for the Aromatherapy Registration Council. So again, just thank you. The very first question I love to ask my guests is just to share your journey. Like, how did you end up here teaching chemistry for aromatherapists?
Okay. Well, we're going back in the mists of time to last century here. I saw recently there was the concept of the vintage aromatherapist, and I'm going, yeah, I probably fit in that category. But it was quite, I don't know. I mean, we could talk about the miraculous aspect of how I ended up, if you like.
Whatever you want to share. It's your
Sure,
time
okay.
to share whatever you'd like.
Yeah, well, it is, I don't know. I mean, a lot of people pray and believe in the power of prayer. And I had finished my science degree in Sydney and was knocking around, not really getting employed how I needed to be employed and not wanting to be employed in the sorts of jobs I could apply for. I didn't fancy being a laboratory scientist or anything, which is what my degree had sort of planned me towards. And one night I was, angsting about this, calling myself underemployed rather than unemployed, but, definitions. And my mum said to me, she said, darling, have you prayed about this? And that's how she speaks, because she's very English. And I said, no, actually, not. Sorry. And she said, don't be sorry. Just get down before you go to bed tonight. Kneel down, do the whole thing, pray, ask God to show you. It's like, okay, what do you want me to do with my life? What can I use my science degree for? And I prayed it earnestly on my knees, and I thought, right, okay, I'll go to bed now. Jolly good. See what happens. And yeah, exactly. And surprise, surprise, the very next morning, I woke up and, I was just going to go on my day which included looking in the newspapers for new jobs, blah, blah. And I just had this sudden thought, why don't you contact your old chemistry teacher at the university and ask them what they would suggest that you do? So I thought, oh, this is so weird. I didn't even like the guy. And it was 3 years before. And would he remember me? Because this is my first year chemistry teacher that came to mind. I thought, I don't know. So I rang and he said, oh, yes, I do remember you. You were clever, weren't you? And I'm going, yeah, okay. And he said, yes, I've got time to see you. If you can get to my office by 9:30, I've got about 20 minutes and we could have a brief chat and then I'll see if I can help you. I was like, okay. So he doesn't want me to talk on the phone. Right. Quickly get to the university on my bicycle because I didn't have a car at this stage. And he spoke to him. And it just so happened, this is the year 1991. And Dr. Penwell had just been to Australia and had met with this guy, who's actually, his name is Dr. Lyle Williams, to give him credit. And he was one of the first people to get interested in the tea tree oil industry and making it grow, and not just being a sort of cottage industry, but really getting standards made, getting, quality growth happening and plantations and so on. And Dr. Penwell had met Dr. Williams and they were very interested. And the reason for Dr. Penwell's visit was to give a lecture at the university, as well as visit various aromatherapists and growers of oils and so on. And so happens that at this lecture, another person attended whose name is Pamela Taylor. And she's probably not known outside of Australia, and maybe not even anymore because she's no longer working in aromatherapy. But at the time, she was one of the key trainers and instigators of the International Federation of Aromatherapists in Australia. She'd come from England, and with another friend and colleague, she was doing 10-day intensive workshops and sort of, really in the apprenticeship model for aromatherapy training, which I personally still think would be helpful for a lot of people, because you get that immersion and the saturation with the concepts, and you're working on each other's bodies as a massage therapist, because in Australia massage is key to aromatherapy. You wouldn't go to an aromatherapy treatment unless you're expecting a massage. So I thought, well, that's interesting, because Pamela Taylor had asked Dr. Williams, would he please teach what Dr. Penwell had taught about, which was the chemistry of essential oils. Would he please teach the aromatherapists? And Dr. Williams said, I'm far too busy. No, sorry. But she kept persisting and ringing him every sort of couple of weeks or so. Have you found anyone? Can you help me? Please, this is really key information for aromatherapy. And it just so happened the day I turned up, he was getting sick of her calling him. And he said, look, this sounds very interesting. You want to work with your science degree, but you don't want to work in a laboratory. Here's this opportunity. Would you ring this woman, please? She's an aromatherapist. And I went, a what? Aroma what? Aroma? What? And he said, yeah, essential oils. It's fine. It's terpenoid chemistry. You'll be right. And so he gave me the phone number and I rang it. Went away, left him, rang Pam, and she said, oh, are you one of Dr. Williams's students? Great, let's meet. So we met and we talked, and in the conversation I realized that she was onto something, because the way aromatherapy had been taught, it's using the essential oils, but without the knowledge of how they're doing what they're doing. I said to her, well, can you tell me where I should start? If you want to teach chemistry, and she described a little bit about Dr. Penwell's lecture, how he had taken the different compounds which were in the essential oils and spoken about each one and its functional group and blah, 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 blah. And she's saying, I have no idea what even is an atom or a molecule. I don't even know what that is. And I went, oh my goodness. Having to start a course in chemistry from that very, stuff you learn in grade school kind of thing, it's like, oh, okay, it's going to be interesting. And then she said, I want you to take us through to understand how the different chemicals actually affect the human body. Can you do that? And I said, I don't know. And so I went to university library, and she said, look, here, you'll need to read all of these books on aromatherapy, which were the standard texts for the 1990s, 1980s. And I read them and I thought, oh, that's interesting. And then she said, you better come and have treatments. And I went and had treatments and had lovely experiences, complete, utter relaxation. I know that for me, a marjoram massage will send my blood pressure so low I can't get off the couch. And that really surprised me, because I was in quite a, uncertain and fairly anxious state at the time. So yeah, and she said, look, okay, let's make an 8-week course. Let's get my students who've been aromatherapy students for the last couple of years, who are my cream of the cream, and we'll hire rooms at the university with Dr. Williams' help, and we'll do it. And I went back to Dr. Williams and I said, this is what's happened, and thank you very much for that lead. That's marvelous. And he said, oh, you might want this book. And he gave me Penhowell's book, the L'Aromathérapie Exactement.
Mm-hmm.
And you might have thought, oh, well, what use is that? It's all in French. But so happens that in my high school, I had actually studied French and was deliberating at the university whether I would follow languages or science. So I had enough French to read Dr. Penhowell's book, and essentially my course was drawn from it, but through the lens of the Lamiaceae family. So lavender, obviously, thyme, mint, all of these ones that are in the Lamiaceae family. And yeah, it started from there. And so Pam got the students, we got the room, I taught the chemistry, went along, and the students were going, wow, this is amazing. I didn't know, because they also didn't know what is an atom. And I just took them very basically, not through all the complex stuff, because I said, we're only going to learn 3 atoms, chemistry, carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. It's all you really need, because that's what's mostly in the oils. And we just went along like that.
That's incredible.
Isn't it? So it seems miraculous, because my life was going along like this, in this direction, and all of a sudden it's like going over here now.
I'm a firm believer in providence, that
Yeah.
everything happens exactly as it's meant to happen.
Yeah.
And you sat down, you opened yourself up to the possibility of something bigger than you,
which I'd never known. Yeah, exactly.
And it just, that's incredible. I love that.
Yeah.
I love that story. Thank you so much, Joy, for sharing that.
You're welcome. Yeah. Oh dear. Yeah. I mean, from the get-go, I realized more research is needed. And unfortunately, I'm still saying that today.
It's been a process to get here, where people are actually starting to do research.
Exactly.
Oh, yeah.
And I had hoped that it would have happened much more quickly, but at least now chemistry is embedded in aromatherapy programs. So people are actually beginning to understand, we're not just dealing with a magical substance. We've actually got chemicals which are doing stuff. Yeah. So yeah, the students from the first class were actually instrumental. They said, Joy, could you translate Dr. Penhowell's book? And I said, no, don't think so, because, well, I'll try. So I contacted Dr. Penhowell, and he said, no, I don't want it translated into English. And I said, oh, okay. And fair enough. I'm a sort of 20-something newly graduated scientist. Why should he trust me to translate his book? But, if you don't ask, you don't know. And so then the students said, well, your lectures were fine and, really interesting and everything, but we couldn't possibly write it all down. And we feel like we really want to be able to read over everything and chew it over and get to grips with it, in our own time. And I said, oh, interesting. Okay. I'll learn how to use a word processor then, and a computer. And because this is before the days of having to use computers at university.
Oh, yes. I remember those days.
Exactly. So I did that. And one of the aromatherapy companies, the CEO was actually one of my students. And he said, oh, look, we put out little booklets and things. Let me help you get the first run printed. And someone else said, I'll like to advertise on the back page and la la la. So I thought, right, okay, there's some funds, and got $500, 500 copies printed. And then as Pam kept doing it, because she kept getting students and I kept teaching for her, and those copies sold. And then I went, oh, that's interesting. All gone now. I need to print some more. And then I got started to, self-publish the book, which was the basic chemistry of aromatherapeutic oils, and that was fascinating. Yeah. And along the way, there was a little group of women who were interested in doing research, and we didn't know how to do it, and I didn't have a PhD at the time, so we contacted someone at the university who was working with, not Dr. Williams, he was too busy, but another professor at a different university. He was developing the e-nose and was very interested in essential oils and olfaction. And so we did a little project which was comparing the different mood effects of different aromas. So then kept on teaching, and then started teaching in different colleges, and Pam was winding down her teaching operations because she was at the sort of end of that part of her life. And one of my students was a nurse, and in fact a director of nursing at an aged care place. And she said, we use aromatherapy all the time on all of our patients. They all get 5 doses of different oils during the day. Could we do an evaluation? Would you help me? And it's like, oh, maybe. Maybe, let's try. Okay. So I did some literature searching of how did people measure mood and behaviors in dementia, and started down that road. And we did a very, very complex design because we tried to measure behaviors at each time of the aromatherapy implementation. And we did a crossover design, and it was a long time, 2 weeks on this program, 2 weeks not on it. And these weren't on it at first, and then they were on the program, and we were measuring, were there any differences? And we had to do a washout period because they hadn't had the essential oils, and yeah, regularly. So it's just needing to do all of that. And
yeah,
that was voluntary, no funding. But at the end of it, we did get it published. It is published, but the results were equivocal. It wasn't clear whether the aromatherapy was helping. What was it helping exactly? Because the behaviors were less when people were just sitting around doing nothing, but they were just as resistive when being nursed or done things to, like showering, having their medication. So it didn't actually help them in those intervention times, but it did seem to keep them calmer the rest of the time, which is okay. But yeah,
and improving somebody's quality of life is definitely a worthy goal.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
even if it wasn't what we expected it to be, having calmer residents is a good thing.
Especially if you're the director of nursing.
Yeah.
But she knew that anyway, and she was going to go on using it, whatever the results, because she knew from experience that it actually made a difference. And then she said to me, this marvelous woman, Letitia Quirk, and she said, Joy, I think you need to go and do a PhD. I was like, what?
Excuse me?
Yeah, I'm quite busy being a teacher. And she said, well, you keep on saying more research is needed. Why don't you go and do it? It's like, oh, okay. And then that was another sort of providence moment or God moment, because I met somebody who was doing research on nicotine for Alzheimer's, and it was in the same sort of cognitive function area, because I thought the essential oils must be doing something cognitively. And so we had a big conversation. He said, just apply to Southern Cross University. They've got scholarships. You might get it. You might get lucky. So I did, and they did. And so I got a scholarship, and based on the idea that I was going to look at aromatherapy as it was used in nursing homes in the laboratory. Does it impact on the enzyme that's one of the drug targets for Alzheimer's, and then in a clinical trial? So I just went for it and just did all that. And it's like, with the idea that would teach me about research and how to do research.
And we are so thankful that you did that. I'm speaking for all the aromatherapists out there. So thankful that you did that.
Yeah. Well, this is the thing now, is that people are starting to ask, well, how do I do research, and what research quality is required for accurate reporting?
Right. And
You're
a member of ARCOT, correct?
Indeed, yeah, and that's my solace, because at the end of the PhD, instead of following an academic career, another life choice presented itself, which was to have a baby or not to have a baby. And by the time you're pregnant, it's kind of like a whatever choice you make, and it's like, okay, I'm doing the baby thing, which in my case I wasn't able to do the academic mother thing, and so I just had a break for about 10 years. But then things changed, of course, and aromatherapy just sort of, everyone started going online, and I went to a Botanica conference, and somebody there said, oh, well, it's actually Melanie from DropSmart, Melanie Kovac. And she said, oh, you're the Joy Bowles. Your book, The Chemistry of Essential Oils, Aromatherapeutic Oils, that's my Bible. You're amazing. And I'm going, am I? I've been very quiet for the last 10 years. Oh, my goodness. So that got me into that. But the ARCOT is a recent, well, not actually so recent anymore, but I think we've been going for 4 years now. It's our fourth year. And the aim of it is to actually develop reporting guidelines so that anybody doing aromatherapy research at least reports things like the botanic name of the plant that the oil was extracted from, and the chemistry. What were the percentages of the constituents? And I know that we can't get down to the 0.1% accuracy, because but at least to know, was it a majorly linalool containing oil, or was it majorly something else, whatever. So yeah, so we're working on that at the moment, and we've done the treats, which is a checklist of the things that the sort of task force thought of. We've had about 14 or 15 people over the years, and we've now got a core of about 9 of us, and we just brainstormed and thought, what would be the things that we would insist on reporting if we were doing research? What would we insist has to be reported in order for it to be replicable, in order for it to be valid, really. My life would have been so different if I'd have stayed on the research trajectory. But one thing really inspired me was meeting Dr. Jessie Hawkins, and the fact that she actually she got a college to then fund independent research. I mean, I now know that she's doing a few other things as well, and getting sort of corporate sponsorship for the trials that she does. Fair enough. You've got to get your funding from somewhere.
Exactly.
But she was actually doing it, and it's like, oh, that will be the future. I mean, the chemistry, I still love teaching the chemistry if I get a chance. But what I've done is I've actually collaborated with Tisserand Institute, and my chemistry course, which was over 8 weeks, has been condensed into 7 hours of intensity, but with some workshops and things. So if people want to do the chemistry, my style, that's where it is sitting at the moment, is with Tisserand Institute.
Can you talk about that just a little bit, the use of active constituents versus the whole oils?
Yes. Thank you for that. Throughout my sort of process of teaching the chemistry and so on, the thought has many times occurred to me, well, why don't we just use these active ingredients? Why do we need to use the whole oil, especially if the whole oil contains constituents that have never been researched, and we don't know what they do? Just have no idea. I mean, probably, like most of the essential oil terpenoids, they will be antioxidant, anti-inflammatory, possibly analgesic. They might be even antispasmodic if we're lucky. Those are the main characteristics that our research, let's say. There are probably other things that the oils do that we don't know because no one is doing the research. Amongst the traditional aromatherapists who I was kind of brought up with or grown into what I do now, it was almost like a credo or a belief. We must use the whole oil, and it should not be adulterated, and it should not have anything added to it or anything. It mustn't even be a blend of two different lavender species. It must be purely angustifolia, or it must be purely, latifolia. We mustn't blend them. And yeah, intellectually, I can't see any reason why we shouldn't. Like, for example, you've got a lavender oil and it's a bit low in linalool, and you really want it to have more of the linalool properties. So why not get your bottle of linalool and put some in? So long as it's the right isomer of linalool, however. That seems to matter. Yeah, so we do know that much. But yeah, it is interesting because, of course, a lot of the belief system is that the whole oil is as nature intended it, and there's some sort of, belief that because it's in the oil, therefore it's meant to stay as a whole oil for our use. But as far as I can see, that is a belief rather than a scientific fact.
Interesting. So we brought up a little bit ago that I'm on the board for the Aromatherapy Registration Council, and we are looking to the future of aromatherapy. So as a vintage aromatherapist, well, a vintage scientist for aromatherapy, like what do you see as some of the possible futures?
I have been thinking about this and wondering if aromatherapy as it has used to been practiced is viable anymore. I know in Australia we've had a big downturn in the number of people who are keeping up their registration as aromatherapists, and our peak body, the organization, is no longer functional for whatever reason. It may resurge later, but I don't know what's happened there. And I think partly that's because of a legislative thing that happened with insurance. There was that the government decided, unless it's got an evidence base, we are not going to allow insurance companies to give a rebate for those treatments. And unfortunately, aromatherapy was deemed to have not enough proper evidence for its effects. So so that, I think that is a sad future, because it may just mean that aromatherapy, as we have practiced it in the past, is going to sort of dwindle off. But then at the same time, we've had a lot of uptake of aromatherapy and the use of essential oils as therapeutics, which is a slightly different thing perhaps, by nurses and other sorts of allied health professionals who are using essential oils to help, and particularly end-of-life care and the whole pregnancy, labor, midwifery. A lot of people are interested in the use of oils for those particular purposes. Recovery, post-operative recovery, management of nausea, assisting with sleep and things like that. So I think the future will probably have to include the clinical workings of aromatherapy. I don't know. I realized, to my slight dismay, that I don't really know how aromatherapy is practiced in the States. Could you enlighten me on that? I'm just curious.
It's very interesting here because many people just go and purchase essential oils wherever they can find them. And we have a lot of the multi-level marketing here. But as a certified aromatherapist, a registered aromatherapist, I work one-on-one with my clients. I'm not a nurse, though. I'm not a massage therapist. So literally, it is therapeutic aromatherapy that I practice. And it's just one-on-one, doing the whole intake, creating bespoke blends to target whatever system they're struggling with to support them and help them, And a lot of people are seeking aromatherapy here in the United States now because of the overuse of drugs, They don't
Yeah.
want to continue adding more and more drugs to their regimen. They want to get off of the drugs. So they're looking for alternate ways to make that happen. And some people are definitely seeking out aromatherapy, acupuncture, chiropractic, massage therapy, a well-rounded use of the complementary modalities.
Yeah. And that's, I mean, saying all of those things together, I think that also will be something we will see in the future, is it
Yeah.
won't be purely aromatherapy, but it'll be aromatherapy plus.
And exactly.
Yeah, whatever it
Exactly.
might be.
Well, because
Mm.
I'm a whole person and I can't just use one thing for my
Yeah,
whole person. So
exactly.
yeah,
Exactly. And
seeking out the different modalities for whatever it is that I need at that time. And there's a big resurgence of people actually understanding their bodies now,
yes,
listening to their bodies now, understanding nutrition. Oh my gosh, there's a huge uptake in people just getting the basics
yeah,
and
that's true.
understanding how our bodies work. It's
Yeah,
it's pretty it's pretty exciting.
yeah, it is. It's hopeful, isn't it?
It is. It's very hopeful. Yeah.
In that regard, you know,
Yeah.
and then hopefully that will flow on into the, you know, we got to take care of our environment because that's where our food grows, and you
Yes.
know, and and the
Yes.
soil quality, and
Exactly. Exactly.
that
Yeah.
whole thing. Yeah. So in terms of that sort of future, I think that's really really great. I think also the use of essential oils and aromatherapy, particularly the olfactory sense,
Mhm.
um, and helping people self-manage whatever chronic mood or chronic pain or whatever they're in. I think those things, as it seems that, you know, infectious disease, apart from one tiny little virus that we don't really want to talk about much, you know, but infectious disease is on the decline generally
Mhm.
worldwide.
Yeah.
Um, and chronic disease is on the huge uprise, including mental health issues, including heart disease, diabetes, and chronic pain.
Mhm.
And so I think aromatherapy can really step in there, and but particularly from the psychological aspect of being a tool that people can use for their own well-being management.
Earlier you mentioned Melanie Kovac
Yeah,
and how your book is her Bible.
yeah,
So I mean, I was just excited when you said you were gonna come on the show, little fangirling over here because you do inspire aromatherapists. You really do with your knowledge and the way that you approach chemistry. But
yeah.
who inspires you?
Who inspires me? Well, because I'm not a clinician, I actually feel a bit envious of people who are. And I kind of wish that I had included that as well. Sometimes I think, oh, wouldn't it be nice to actually have the practice of it? So there are various clinical people like Madeline Kirchhoff, Rhiannon Lewis, obviously, very inspirational women doing amazing things with their businesses, and Melanie herself, in fact. You know, it was a sort of a bit of a, oh, when I found out what she was doing, creating Drop Smart, it was like,
Mhm.
oh, that's so needed. We need this sort of way of accessing the information. And you know, the way she's actually got, you know, I think she's got over 14,000 clinical references in there. They're not all human clinical
Mhm.
references, sadly, but still, it gives you an idea and a hint. And yeah, so it's people like that that are actually doing stuff in their world.
Yeah.
Maria Aparecida Neves from Brazil, yeah, she's doing amazing work there. You know, getting doctors on board to help clinically um, evaluate aromatherapy clinically. So it's like,
Beautiful.
yeah, so yeah, lots of different people. Yeah, the people who are taking it to the people, I suppose. I always feel like I'm a bit of a girl in the back room that sort of just goes, oh well, there's this a bit of information here, you could use that.
You know what though? I just had this conversation with someone earlier today. There's people that are out in the front, your visionaries, the people that are, showing up and the face of aromatherapy. And then there's the support people. We
Mm,
need both. I always equate it with performance arts. Like I love being on stage. I grew up performing. No problems. Public speaking, whatever. I don't care. But now in my older years, I've realized that the place that I work the best is as the
Yeah.
stage manager in the support
Yes.
role, so helping other people, supporting them, pushing them forward, keeping them on task. That's where I do my best work.
It's also about leverage, isn't it? I mean,
Mhm.
if I worked as a clinical aromatherapist, I would be seeing one person at a time for the treatment. And then,
Mhm.
over a week, I might see, I don't know how many they would see, but let's say 25 people. Whereas in an hour's podcast or lecture, I might be able to help 2,500 in 1 hour. And
Exactly.
that's sort of like, oh, yeah, okay.
Exactly. The one-to-one or the one-to-many. Yeah,
Exactly. Yeah. So,
absolutely.
yeah.
So what are some of your other passions outside of aromatherapy chemistry?
Oh. Well, I've been asking myself that question because
Mm,
I'm thinking, how do I sustain the chemistry and the aromatherapy stuff so that I can still keep on doing that. And during COVID, one thing that I found myself doing was taking my phone camera with me on my walks because I walked daily to keep myself sane. And yeah, I started doing photography of the plants that I saw.
mm,
But it really it brings me a lot of joy,
mm.
and going into nature and again taking my camera with me, and if anything just grabs my eye, I take a photo, and I feel like I'm sort of that's a it's a hobby, it's a passion, it's a well, I don't know, it's almost a compulsion, something like that. And I know I'm well when I've been in nature, and there are photos on my Facebook page of nature. And I know
Beautiful.
I'm not doing quite so well when it's been a few months and I haven't posted anything. And it's like, yeah, okay, you need to get out there and do something, righto. And fortunately, where I live is close to a lot of very beautiful areas, so I can get out and access that.
As we come down to the end of our time, I just always love to let my guest have the last word. If there's something that you want to share with the listeners or something that's heavy on your heart, this time is yours.
Hmm, golly, maybe the need for a global aromatherapy network somehow. I know that ICANN, the International Clinical Aromatherapy Network with Rhiannon, is functional and working. But
Mhm.
I think even more, you're working at the sort of standards level and what is aromatherapy and answering that, and all the countries getting together. And by all, I mean including Turkey, Slovenia, China, Hong Kong, Japan, not just English speaking, but finding a way to weave the world together. And yeah, so I think, if listeners are not yet members of the International Clinical Aromatherapy Network and you want to be, or you haven't heard about it, check it out,
Yeah.
because that global aspect I think will carry us forward whatever comes. Yeah. I know that there is a World Naturopathy Federation, and we may be even able to model something on that, at that level. And it's a bit like one of the aromatherapy organizations in the States, with chapters and representatives in different countries. And yeah, so I don't know, that would be a thing I think that would help to
Yeah.
help the ongoing trajectory. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Joy, for coming on to the show, for sharing your
Well,
story. And your name is suiting.
thank you.
I
Yeah.
appreciate you so much and what you're doing for aromatherapists
Yeah.
worldwide.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Melissa. Yeah, it's been good to speak it out because often I don't get to share that story. Yeah.
Love it.
So
Love
yeah.
it. Oh. Thanks for tuning into this episode of Aromatic Chat with Joy Bowles. Throughout our time together, we mentioned several other people who have been guests on the podcast, and I will include their names in the show notes so you can go back and listen to their interviews. I will also include links to the Tisserand Institute, where you can sign up to learn from Joy, the Aromatherapy Research Quality Appraisal Task Force, also known as ARCOT, and DropSmart. You can leave a review for the show on Apple Podcast or Podchaser. Your review helps new listeners to find the show. I would love to read your thoughts on the podcast. Did you know that you can now send me a text message right from the show notes? If you have an idea for a guest, that would be a great way to share their name with me so I can reach out and invite them to the podcast. Aromatic Chat is produced by Lemon Balm Coaching. I'm your host, Melissa. I help my life and wellness clients move from feeling overwhelmed and exhausted to experiencing peace and energy as they bring their visions to life. Just this morning, I was working with a client and helping them release their stress. There are 5 simple tips that I share with all of my clients, and you can get those tips right now at the link in the show notes for the ebook From Stressed to Your Best, 5 Tips to Stress Less. Just click on the link to get your copy today. I will see you next week with my take on episodes 107 and 108. Until then, peace, love, and aromatics.